to Cog Hill Road that comes in at $20 million. So essentially, this is the final tally of all of our projects. So we have it broken down by project type, total number of projects, percentage of total projects, and then total project cost. As expected, the vast majority of our projects are highway projects. This includes capacity changes, interchange modifications, and safety improvements. Within this category, we have about 144 total projects, which represents about 71% of our total projects. That total comes in about just over $6.6 billion. We have our active transportation projects. We have about 21 of those that represents 11% of our total projects, and that comes in at $426 million. Next, we have 13 transit projects, and these are basically BRT extensions or new BRT lines. So that comes in about $1.4 billion. Next, we have our travel demand management. So these are basically our parking rides. A lot of these come from our 2019 parking ride studies with the backing of our localities. We have about 8 parking rides projects, about 4% of our total projects, and that comes in at about $53 million. We have our freight and passenger rail projects. We have 9 of those, which represents about 4% of our total projects. That comes in at $335 million. We have our bridge projects. We have 6 bridge projects, about 3% of our total projects, and that comes in at $435 million. So altogether, we have 201 projects that totaled about $9.3 billion throughout the region. So a hefty price tag over the next 20 years for our projects. So this is our tentative schedule. We're looking to get approval of our universal projects at our meeting today. We're looking to have project scoring within the month of December, and then have a formal public comment period between December of 2025 and January 2026, with approval from our policy board in February 2026. So I want to open up the floor for any discussions, any comments or concerns regarding our universal projects that was disseminated to you all on November 20th. Yes, Mitch.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. I did want to just update Plan RVA and the group. Our rail team is planning on meeting with VPRA. I guess there's some additional conversations that have to be had about their potential projects for inclusion within the universe. So that meeting is scheduled for next week. So we'll forward the projects that they have on the horizon. They haven't been able to solidify anything as of yet, but hopefully the meeting next week will be able to provide more concrete projects for you guys.
Thanks, Mitch. Let's see. Miles, did you have anything to add on that?
The only thing that I would say is that the revenues through FRA aren't included in our constrained plan. So if it's something that would be like Amtrak FRA funded, it wouldn't be within this overall constraint, but we'll definitely look at it for inclusion in the broader plan. It's just going to kind of depend on what the expected funding streams would be there.
Yeah, I think that was something we were trying to work with them on as well. But I think a lot of this would be Commonwealth funded, and it is also highly dependent on the next legislative session. As I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of agencies coming in for additional funding, and I guess reworking the CTF is potentially on the table, but these are future conversations.
Thank you, Mitch. Do we have any other questions or concerns regarding the universal projects?
This is Ashley with Henrico County. What is the process if we find a project between now and the end of this plan that we think needs to be added to the universe of projects? Like if we approve this today, do we still have the ability to add something if we find something that fell through the cracks?
We do have the ability to amend the project list if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Miles?
I guess, Ashley, are you talking about before this overall plan is adopted or after the fact?
Before this plan is adopted.
Um, so I guess we're going to be moving into project scoring as soon as we
Mhm.
have an approved list. So I mean, I think we have to put a hard cap on when we can get those in. Is it just additional review that's needed on the Henrico set, or
Well, Mitch mentioning that there may be more projects coming in. I mean, that's what
so?
made me think about it.
Sure, and I think historically the rail projects just they've gone in our vision list because again that funding is not in the revenues that are considered as part of this plan since we're looking at the sort of the VDOT and federal highways and the DRPT um, FTA funding streams. So I think we would still have an opportunity to consider those projects on the rail side if those are the main concerns. But if it was something that was more on the locality project sets, I think it'd be a little bit trickier to do that and add that to the scoring at this point, if we do have an approved set.
Understood. Um, I did notice one transit project that the county would like to add. So I guess I should mention that now before we approve. And I apologize, I was not able to send it through email before, but a Willow Lawn transit transfer facility. We need to get that added to the list as well. And it would probably be around the same cost as the Perham one.
Ashley, could you provide like the details in a follow-up email on that,
Yes, I
like a
can.
description, cost estimate, all the
Can
pieces we
do.
need?
All right, Trip, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so yes, not too surprised, but I find it in the modal breakdown of the request, but at this point, I know they're just proposals. Did want to clarify, approving this list today just means these are going to be the ones to be scored and analyzed. It doesn't mean we're in any way endorsing any of these projects at this point, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, JJ.
Hey Dorian, I just wanted to, I know we were going back and forth on an email with some projects. Some didn't seem relevant to be added, but I think we still had a couple that were just missing cost estimates. Is this approval of this list, including the ones we're going back and forth on right now? Or I just wanted to see what that process was.
Yes, so the approval of this list includes the projects that were within the revision slide. So if I can't go back to that, sorry. These additional, so the revisions to the Powhite Parkway and then the additional 288 projects and then the Route 10 project.
Okay, thank you, Dorian. I missed that slide. Appreciate you clarifying.
Of course. All right, y'all. I'm looking down the line. All right, Patrick.
Hey Dorian, I kind of had a similar question as JJ. We added a project, or I sent you an email about the Rockville Road realignment. Is that one going to be added?
Let me see here. From my understanding, that should have been included, but let me look here.
I appreciate that.
Of course.
Patrick, do you happen to know the functional class off the top of your head?
I can pull it up real quick, Miles.
Because that may be an issue as well if it doesn't meet the project inclusion guidelines of a minor arterial for road widenings or principal arterial for any other um, highway improvements, then it won't make it into the list. As of now, I'm not seeing the Rockville Road, so that might be the issue as well. It just did not meet the project conclusion guidelines.
I'll add it in the chat, but we can keep moving forward.
So I guess we could add that one as a subject to review. Dorian,
Okay.
just add that to the list for additional projects subject to review for eligibility.
Okay, we can definitely add that for a subject to review category as well.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, is this Todd?
Hey, yes. Hi, Dorian. How are you doing?
All right, and yourself?
Great. We sent over a list of projects to be included in the universe of projects as well from VDOT standpoint. We were going over the list and comparing them to ours, and we noticed a few of them that were not included in that. Um, I don't want to take up time during the meeting with that, but I'll send over the sheet of projects that we saw that were not included in yours. If you could just give an explanation why they were not included, or just go over it with us at your earliest convenience, just so that we know. That would be great.
Sure thing.
Thank you. I'll send that email on over to you either later on today or first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Sounds good. Thank you, Todd.
Yep, thank you. Um, am I muted? No.
All right, I'm looking down the line one more time. I'm not seeing any additional hands. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a recommendation for just a recommendation of the university projects with the revisions that you see here, with the additions that you see here, and then with the caveat that we will be reviewing additional projects for project inclusion guidelines into the universe of to the universe of projects.
Yeah, just quiet, like not be what it yeah. Which that's what I've seen thus far from most of.
So I guess hearing no objections, we can go forward with the universe of projects with the revisions and the to be determined projects going forward.
Yep.
Okay, thank you all. So next we have our LRTP Phase 6 project prioritization methodology and scorecard update. So this is just going to be a bit of a review. So we first start with our goal, which basically says where do we want to be? How do we measure the success of our goals? How will we get there in terms of a strategy? And then how much a potential solution will help in our performance measures. So for example, we have here the goal being a system where no one is killed or seriously injured and people feel secure and comfortable regardless of how they travel. The objective would be by 2050, the number of people killed or seriously injured on all roadways would be reduced by 100%. We will implement complete streets policies as a strategy, including adding sidewalks, crosswalks, and other proven countermeasures. And then the performance measure tangibly will be the number of fatal and injury crashes avoided. So what's new? New performance measures needed for this round of the LRTP are resiliency, reliability, freight access, and economic development, with an update including natural and cultural resources and on-road emissions. So we've developed 12 regional performance measures. These are derived to mirror smart scale performance measures while reflecting updated regional goals. So what we have below is the smart scale factor weights by category. Smart scale divides up MPOs by the population and transportation needs. The Richmond MPO is within the category B, alongside Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, and Roanoke. As you can see, congestion mitigation and accessibility are the highest weighted factors within Smart Scale. These factors are best reflected within our own regional goals of sustainability and reliability. So for instance, throughout sustainability, we have goals um, such as access to jobs, access to services, VMT per capita reduction, as well as congestion performance measures such as person throughput and person hours of delay. So we want to reflect that in saying that sustainability and reliability would be the highest weighted factors within our LRTP goal. So we'll go a little bit in depth with that going forward. So this is going to be a bit of information, so bear with me here. So within our safety goals, we have two safety goals: reduction in fatal injury crashes weighted by severity. This is at a 70% weight. Um, so this takes the average number of fatal and injury crashes over a 5-year period before and after the proposed improvements. So basically what we do is um, what we want to look at is the reduction in equivalent property damage only of fatal and injury crashes due to project implementation. Of course, the equivalent property damage only is a method used to standardize crashes based on severity. Basically, we assign a dollar value for every crash severity, and you can see the rounded value in weights to the right. And what we want to do here is compile 5 years of data and injury crashes within project limits. The project limits are defined as a 250-foot buffer around the project area. We review the SYIP to determine if any improvements have been made within the project limits. If so, we shorten the analysis period to the post-improvement period only. The weight and severity of each crash by EPDO using the statewide smart scale weighting and calculate the average annual EPDO. For roadway and bike pad projects, we find the appropriate crash modification factor for the project improvement. So basically, this is a list of countermeasures that we can look towards to find that modification factor. The percent expected crash reduction is calculated as the percent expected crash reduction, 1 minus the crash modification factor. Most improvements have been standardized for statewide usage for transit, passenger rail, and parking ride lots. The expected reduction in VMT will be used to calculate crash reduction. For freight rail, the expected crash reduction in truck traffic will be used. And then we multiply the PECR by the annual average EPDO of fatal and injury crashes to determine the expected reduction. Next, we have our reduction in rate of fatal and injury crashes weighted by severity. So this is the rate of fatal and injury crashes per million vehicle miles or million entered vehicles into an intersection. So this measure builds on the data and expected crash reduction in the first safety measure, whereas the first safety measure is focused on the overall number of fatal and injury crashes. The measure is focused on the rate of fatal and injury crashes per million vehicle miles segments or million vehicles entering an intersection. So for the methodology, we determine the project limits as defined by the first safety measure. For segments, calculate the annual traffic volume for the base year in million vehicle miles. And then for projects that cross multiple segments, the annual traffic volume is calculated as the average volume of all segments. For intersections, the measure is million entered vehicles. And to calculate the annual EDPO of fatal plus injury crashes avoided, convert into crash rate using the formula of crash rate reduction equals EPDO of fatal and injury crashes avoided, million vehicles, or the million equivalent as appropriate. Excuse me. Next, we'll get into our sustainability measures. So, excuse me. So our first sustainability measure is the change in average access to jobs. This is about 30% of our sustainability measure. This measures the improvements in traffic speed, pedestrian quality of service, or transit frequency, among other types of improvements. This analysis requires the use of the RTC model and the RTPO accessibility analysis tool to estimate the future of no build and build job accessibility. The project is added to the RRTPO accessibility tool, and outputs are then used to summarize average job accessibility. For all highway, transit, and active transportation projects, we code the project into the model. We flag the links for any connectivity changes due to any active transportation projects. We extract the auto and transit skims for the build and no build model runs and input into the RRTPO accessibility analysis tool. The RRTPO accessibility analysis tool calculates the improvements in number of jobs reachable within that travel time resulting. The average number of jobs reachable represents the total jobs accessible for each task to other tasks. Then we divide the total reachable job divided by the task population, and this gives the total jobs per person. This calculation is done for all task sets to get the average job accessibility per person. For all other projects, the change in average job accessibility per person is not measured for freight and rail projects. Our next accessibility measure is the change in average access to to goods and services. This is also at 30% of our sustainability PM. So we are measuring the increase in average access to weighted destinations per 1,000 persons. Each destination within each destination type is given a weight score and in the range of 1 to 5. Each destination type is also weighted as essential multiplier of 1.5 or non-essential with a multiplier of 1 to establish a destination score by task. For all highway, transit, and active transportation projects, of course, this again requires the regional model and the TPO accessibility analysis tool. We code the project into the model, flag the links for any connectivity changes due to any active transportation projects. We exact the auto and transit skims for the build and no build model runs and input it into the RRTPO accessibility analysis tool. The analysis tool calculates the improvement in number of weighted destinations reachable within the travel time resulting from a proposed transportation improvement and generates destination accessibility scores for each project. The total reachable weighted destination divided by task population gives the total weighted destination per person. Since the number is likely to be small, multiplying this by 1,000 gives the total weighted destination per 1,000 people. For all other projects, the change in average access to weighted destinations per 1,000 persons is not measured for freight and rail projects. On to our system-wide reduction in VMT per capita. We weighed this at 20%. This is the sum of number of miles traveled by all vehicles on all roadways divided by total regional population. The VMT per capita is calculated at the system level. For highway projects, we code the project into the model with assumed posted speed limits, facility types, and number of lanes. And then we calculate the total difference in VMT per capita between the no build and build model. For other modes, we estimate reduction in total VMT per capita. The VMT reduction is associated with a shift of demand from auto to other modes of transportation. So now we're getting to our statewide reduction in annual VOC, NOx, PM 2.5, and CO2 emission equivalent emissions in metric tons. So this is basically our air quality performance measure. So for highway projects, we code the project into the model with assumed posted speeds, facility types, and number of lanes. We calculate daily emissions for each pollutant based on the emissions factor. So the figure on the right, excuse me, represents the emissions factor of grams per vehicle miles for different speed bins. The speed bins are a range of vehicles' congested speeds. For example, if the model congestion speed is 35 miles per hour, the emissions are estimated from the factors corresponding with the speed bin of 32.5 to 37.5, as you see here. The emissions in grams is computed by following the following formula. The model volume times link distance times emissions factor. This statistic is converted to tons by appropriate conversion factor. So we calculate the total annual emissions for the pollutants. The total annual emissions equals the daily emissions, the NOx and VOC times 365 tons. And then we calculate the total difference in annual emissions between the no build and build model. For transit, active transportation, and freight projects, we calculate the VMT reduction estimate due to the project implementation. We calculate daily emissions reductions for each pollutant as shown in the figure below. And then we calculate the total annual emissions reduction for all pollutants. The total annual emissions equals daily emissions, NOx plus VO2 times 365 tons. And then finally, for sustainability, we have our impact to natural and cultural resources. We weigh the potential for negative impacts on the region's natural and heritage resources, excuse me. Total value of environmental and heritage features within a quarter mile of project limits. So we create the quarter mile buffer around the project. We run the union tool to determine the areas of overlap between the buffer and the environmental and conservation areas hexagon features, excuse me. We calculate the average regional environmental index and regional heritage index scores in a buffer. For each project, we apply an adjustment to the index score based on the project tier shown on the right. And then the adjustment is intended to reflect the potential impact of certain project types. So the average regional environmental index times the adjustment factor equals the adjusted average regional environmental index. And then the average regional heritage index times the adjustment factor equals the adjustment average regional heritage index. We calculate the overall impact score using the following formula: 3 times the adjusted regional environmental index plus the adjusted regional heritage index, which will give you the impact score. So this is a subtractive score. Basically, we want to discourage any development within these natural resource and cultural resource areas. So we apply up to a 5-point subtraction from the final score based on the total potential sensitive acreage impacted. So I just went through goals A, safety, and goal B, sustainability performance measures. Do we have any questions before I move forward?
I have a quick question.
Yes, Mitch.
How were, maybe I missed this, how were the um, cultural resources, natural and cultural resources identified, and where are those cataloged?
So we have a number of different resources that we use for our cultural data sets. Let me see here.
And then a follow-up, if you don't answer it, but are you utilizing the City of Richmond's Cultural and Heritage Resource Plan at all in your considerations?
So we have a number of different data sets that we're using here, a number of different national wetlands inventory, aquatic life conservation opportunity areas. And you're asking specifically about cultural resources.
Yes.
Miles, I'm looking through my notes now. I'm looking for it as we speak.
Sure. So, I mean, maybe backing up a little bit, what we're trying to do with this is actually integrate the region's natural resources plan, which Plan RVA has developed into the transportation planning process. So that regional environmental index is actually a process where we have gone through the region on the environmental planning side and looked at all the different features and sort of bend them into hexagons across the region to give a value, a generalized value of the sort of number and different types of features. And we have the data on sort of what's contributing to that. But basically a way for us to weight how environmentally sensitive any given area within the region is. And then the cultural resources essentially does the same thing. So it looks at like listed properties, it looks at known tribal sites, it looks at I'm trying to remember what else is in there. Conserved properties and conserved lands throughout the region. So it's basically all of the things we would want to avoid for the cultural impacts is what we're trying to get to. So this is in essence what we're aiming for is sort of a desktop level NEPA screening light with this performance measure.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's more on the, at least the environmental side based off of the plan you guys have already developed.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So for the cultural resources, we're using the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, and then the United States National Park Services.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Trip.
A lot in these slides here to digest. Just wondering the time frame for feedback on this. I was just trying to follow along as you were presenting, but don't have a specific question right
I'm sorry, what was the question?
now. Timeline for feedback on this. I I would need to go back a few slides and kind of look at some of this to formulate questions. We were kind of rolling along here.
So
Which slides would you like to look at specifically?
I think Tripp's asking for the timeline for a response. So I think we're preparing an actual draft document for review.
Mhm.
So I think that's the answer is this is just giving the preview. We'll have an actual document for review coming out to you all.
Okay.
Yes, Guy.
I think I just had part of that answered there. Back on the cultural resources page, um, mentions something about Exhibit 14 and formulas. Where was that? Oh yeah, bullet point 4, index score based on the project tier shown in Exhibit 14. And I guess that's going to be provided in the draft document for us to review and potentially provide comments for.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
This is coming from our draft document. Yes, sir. Any additional questions or concerns? All right, so we'll get into goal C, our reliability performance measures. So our first performance measure is to increase corridor total throughput by all modes. So this is an increase in corridor total person throughput attributed to the project. The number of vehicles successfully entering the system during the analysis period, the peak period, is defined as vehicle throughput by multiplying the vehicle throughput by the average vehicle occupancy rate. Person throughput can be determined An average occupancy rate of 1.2 persons per vehicle will be used based on smart scale practices. So for this, for highway projects, the analysis requires the use of the model. It's to estimate no build and build scenarios. So we code the new facility into the model with assumed posted speed limit, facility type, and number of lanes. We calculate total difference in vehicle hours traveled between the no build and build model. We multiply the difference between the no build VHT from the build VHT by 30% to convert the peak period delayed reduction. And then we compute the average system project vehicle throughput by multiplying the difference between the no build VHT from the build VHT by 60% to convert the vehicle minutes traveled and divide this difference by the average trip length. Then we multiply by the average vehicle occupancy rate of 1.2 to get the person throughput. For trips on other modes, we estimate person throughput for existing and new users in peak period. For transit projects, we compute the number of equivalent vehicles on roadways within the impacted area using a forecasted ridership per hour and an assumed transit occupancy. Once the number of vehicles on the impacted roadway is computed, determine the peak period person throughput for no build and build conditions by multiplying an average vehicle occupancy rate by the vehicle throughput. This performance measure is 40% of our overall reliability goal. Our next reliability performance measure is decrease in person hours of delay. This is also 40% of our reliability goal. This is a peak period analysis, and this is equation of travel time minus travel time free flow speed divided by the number of vehicle trips. For highway projects, we code the project into the RRT into the model with assumed posted speed limit, facility type, and number of lanes. We calculate the total difference in vehicle hours traveled between the no build and build model. We multiply the difference between the no build VHT from the build VHT by 30% to convert to peak period delay reduction. Then we compute the person peak period delay by multiplying the average vehicle delay by an average vehicle occupancy rate of 1.2. For trips from other modes, we estimate the total person travel time savings for existing and new users in the peak hour. The person travel time savings for the existing users is associated with any improvement in frequency or travel time associated with the project. For active transportation projects, the mode shift from vehicles to active transportation projects will be used to calculate the overall reduction in person hours of delay. And then our final reliability PM is the truck throughput on critical freight corridors. This is about 20% of our overall reliability PM. And this looks at the number of trucks present at the start, plus those attempting to enter and successfully enter the system or the project limit during the analysis period, which was a 24-hour period. So we code the new facility into the model with assumed posted speed limits, facility types, and number of lanes. We calculate the total difference in truck hour traveled between the no build and build models. And then we compute the average system truck throughput by multiplying the difference between the no build THC from the build THC by 20% to convert the truck minutes traveled and dividing this difference by the average trip length. For trips on other modes, we estimate total truck throughput for existing and new trucks in the 24-hour period. So that was our reliability, excuse me, our reliability PM. Any questions on that? Thank you. And then we have our last goal of resiliency. So our first PM is the multimodal network redundancy. This is at 50%, and this estimates the ability of the network to absorb a 10% increase in volume. So we code the project into the model with assumed posted speed limit, facility type, and number of lanes. We calculate the total difference in vehicle hours traveled between the build and no build, between the base no build model and 10% increase assigned to no build model. And then we repeat the build scenario. We calculate the difference between the change in vehicle hours traveled in the no build and build scenario. So this is the vehicle hours traveled no build plus 10% minus vehicle hours traveled no build minus the vehicle hours traveled build plus 10% minus the vehicle hours traveled build, and then that equals the change in vehicle hours traveled. We calculate the change in vehicles by dividing the change in vehicle hours traveled by average trip length in hours. And this involves the change in the vehicle hours traveled divided by the average trip time in the no build scenario. And this equals the change in number of trips and vehicles experiencing excessive delay. For trips in other modes, we estimate the mode shift associated with the project. The shift in mode will be used to calculate a simplified redundancy index measure. And this redundancy index is the vehicle hours traveled no build plus 10% minus the vehicle hours traveled shift plus 10% over the average trip time. And then our last PM is the network connectivity. This is 50% of our resiliency PM. This assesses the directness of the shortest route between two TASs in real travel conditions compared to an idealized straight distance as measured in minutes. So for highway and transit projects, we code the project into the model. We calculate the ratio and the vehicle hours traveled between AM peak congestion period and the direct line between TASs at no build free flow speed in the no build model. And then we repeat with the build scenario. We compute the change in the ratio between the build and no build to determine the delta. For trips from other modes, we estimate the total person travel time savings for existing and new users in peak hours. The person travel time savings for existing users is associated with any improvement in frequency or travel time associated with the project. For active transportation projects, the mode shift from vehicles to active transportation projects will be used to calculate the overall reduction in person hours of delay. So as you see in front of you, we have our scorecard, which basically spells out our goals, the weight of each goal, the performance measure within each goal, the weight for each goal, for each performance measure, and then the points associated with it. So as you can see, even though we have sustainability and reliability as our highest weights, we do have a high factor when it comes to fatal and injury crashes reduced. So we still want to prioritize safety at the same time as we mirror our performance measures to the smart scale weight factors. Below you have the benefit score, the cost, and the cost benefit score. These are going to be vital when it comes to our constrained plan scenario, financial scenarios, and we'll get a little bit more into that during the next presentation. But this is our draft scorecard, and this is associated with our performance measures going forward. So I want to leave the floor open for any questions or concerns. Once again, seeing no questions, seeing no hands. Once again, Trip.
Just
Sorry.
wanted to just mention again, doesn't mean don't have questions and concerns. I just want to look at this and digest. I've got a lot of questions and concerns, but I don't think now's the time. I need to look back over all the stuff you just threw at us.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Admittedly, it's a lot, but I want to put as much in there as possible for your review before we can get the document out. So this was our opportunity to present you all with that information accordingly.
Yes, appreciate that, but it definitely is a lot.
Thank you. So just want to reiterate, this is a draft document. You all will have an opportunity to, voice your questions and concerns on this document as well. So hearing none, going forward, then we'll move on to our next presentation, and I will stop sharing my screen.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I know there's a lot of detail, so hopefully this one will be a little bit lighter, easier, because I know the project scoring is very complex. So this is going back to the constrained plan development. So the universe of projects, we're going to put them all through those scorecards and assess how each project is contributing to our goals as a region. And then we have to develop a constrained plan. And I know Dorian went through some of this last meeting, but just as a reminder, a constrained plan basically means the projects that we can actually afford within the revenues that we're expecting to come in. So I know we've had some back and forth this morning about rail projects. So again, it's looking at the revenues that we're expecting to be able to use as a region, and then how can we afford the projects that are proposed. The other big thing with this is we have to adequately operate and maintain the existing system as part of that process. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of coordination in this with the state, with the operators of different roadways and transit systems to come up with this process. You saw this number before, but we're expecting a little over $31 billion for the life of the plan, so for the next 25 years. And that basically covers funds that are coming through VDOT, which we call the highway funds, as well as funds coming through the DRPT and GRTC side, which we're calling transit funds here. But the big thing to note is a lot of those highway funds are flexible. They can be used on transit projects. Highway also covers bike ped projects. So this isn't a strict breakdown of how they are used down the road. The other thing to keep in mind, as I mentioned, we have to maintain and operate the existing system. So in terms of actually developing a financial plan, we take all those funds off the top. Then we take all the funds for projects that have already been committed to through the 6-year program. And then we take off funds for smaller projects that aren't on the LRTP network or weren't in that project inclusion guideline. So we've had a lot of comments about that today. So there's a set aside for those smaller, more local scale projects. So based on the process we went through last time, we only had about a quarter of the overall revenue that was forecast in the constrained long range plan or the regional scale projects. And so if we're looking at that, that's about $7.9 billion for this cycle. So that's sort of the ballpark that we're estimating. We're still finalizing those numbers right now. And then I think Dorian shared this last time as well. But basically what we have is time bands where we look at projects that we can implement sort of in the near term, in the midterm, and then in the long term. And the first thing we do is look at the projects that are already funded. Those come out. Then we look to see if there's any money left over the next 6 years that we could allocate to a project for planning purposes and get some of those smaller projects in. And then we look at this pink section, which is really kind of the bigger, longer term projects, midterm and long term projects. And we use appropriate inflation factors to make sure that those costs are reflective of when they would be potentially completed. And then we also maintain a list of vision projects. So these are projects that we would want to see, but we either can't afford within the constraints of the budget that we're operating under, or there's outside funds like we were talking about with rail, where it's something that is not within this plan's financial plan. And so how do we go about developing this list? Historically, what we've done is we've come and we've worked through the scoring of the projects and worked our way through them to develop a constrained plan that added up to the total budget and brought it back to the work group. And then the work group and localities had a chance to provide input and make revisions, and we got to a final plan. What we're proposing this time around is to actually develop multiple investment scenarios for you to look at. And so the goal on doing this is to be able to actually compare those trade-offs. I think it's hard when you only have one option to consider to understand what the trade-offs actually are in the decisions that we're making. And so we have 4 scenarios that we're proposing. The first is what we're calling the efficiency scenario. The second is our transformative scenario. The third is the mode shift scenario. And the fourth is our business as usual scenario. So walking through each of those, the efficiency scenario is basically focusing on this benefit cost score that we give at the bottom of the scorecard. Rank every project, 1 down to, what did we wind up at? 201, Dorian, whatever the number was at the end there.
201 projects.
Yeah. So 1 to 201, and then just work our way down the list, funding the projects within the constraint plan. And that basically makes the most cost-effective selection. So we're looking at the benefit per dollar invested. This mirrors Smart Scale, it mirrors the CVTA funding, the TPO's existing funding programs. So this is pretty in line with most of the funding structures that exist. And this is what we did in the last LRTP. But we've heard some concerns about how that actually plays out. One of the biggest ones is that it's really hard to fund the projects that are large in cost and kind of transformational in impact. So what we're proposing for the second scenario is to look at the benefit score only. And what that does is, again, give us the projects with the biggest benefits. It doesn't look at costs, so you'll wind up with fewer projects, but they're the most impactful based on our scoring. And one of the reasons that this makes a lot of sense is when our cost benefit process that we're using, we're normalizing everything in a 0 to 100 value. This isn't actually based on the impact overall. It's not like we've monetized the impact. And so because there's that hard cap of 100, it makes projects that get bigger just harder to score because your 100 gets divided by bigger numbers. So this is an attempt to sort of get around that a little bit by looking at an option with just the biggest benefits. The third option and third scenario that we would like to develop is really one focusing on modal shift. So this is prioritizing investments that are non-highway improvements beyond what we've been doing historically. And the main rationale for this is that we have adopted objectives to increase access to transit, reducing vehicle trips, reducing emissions, boosting transit ridership, more bike infrastructure. All of those require us to invest more in transit and bike infrastructure. And so what we're trying to do is strike the right balance here by providing a scenario which reflects those objectives a little bit more in the investment strategy. One of the key decisions that we still need to finalize, and I would very much appreciate input on, is how do we go about this specific scenario? Is it focusing on the percentage of the universe of projects requests? Is it looking at our current split that we have in mode share investments and then increasing that? Or is there something else that we haven't thought of that we should be considering? So that's one of the items I'd like to get some feedback on here. And then before we do that, the final scenario that we're going to develop is really sort of the business as usual scenario. So this is basically looking at the 6-year program, looking at our mix of project types and trying to mirror that in the planning for this LRTP. So if it's 60% highway investments, we want to have 60% highway investments. It basically trying to make the math line up so it's reflective of what we've been doing. And so the goal with all of this is we would have 4 different, very hopefully diverging sets of projects that would come through this process. And we would be able to assess them on how they're actually helping to improve toward those objectives. So that would give the public more information and more options to consider. It would also give this work group more options and sort of a better understanding of the trade-offs when we pick one scenario versus another. We would still go through a final refinement where the work group and localities have a chance to make tweaks to it. But this gives sort of a range of starting points to look at. So I'll pause right there and open it up to any questions or comments anyone has. All right. So I'm not seeing anything. Does anyone have any thoughts going back on this approach that we were looking at, this sort of mode shift approach on how we should go about developing it? This is sort of the one area where I think we don't have a clear idea of the approach because there's a lot of options on how we approach this sort of mode shift version. Obviously, all of them are still using the cost benefit, the scorecards that we're going through, but is there a way that the work group would sort of see this working best? And we don't need a decision today, just input and thoughts would be appreciated. Hey, Mitch.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts about this. And there's a couple different ways you guys can go about it. Some of them, if I think looking at it from just an increasing total like lane miles of either, separated or protected bike lanes and pedestrian infrastructure, network connectivity metrics, like a walkability score or a bikeability score. And there, you can use like the walk score metric as like a baseline, and comparing that across the region at like, maybe the census block level. Um, but I think part of it is going to have to be establishing like what is your like goal metric and like how are you going to get there. I think is the probably key to develop a trajectory of projects and prioritization, whether it's going to be like network expansion, um, infrastructure quality, and or just like connectivity scores. Um, but I think the easiest way to do that is usually just like a year over year goal increase in bike lane miles, protected bike lane miles, and um, connectivity metric for the region at the neighborhood level, for like pedestrian infrastructure.
Yeah, so I apologize if I wasn't clear on this. The goal across all four of these investment scenarios would be to compare them with the objectives that we've already adopted for this plan.
Right.
And so that we have a way to measure all of these things, reduced vehicle trips, reduced emissions. We can calculate those parts of it. I think what we're struggling with on this one is sort of how do we define what is an increased modal shift investment scenario? Is it prioritizing, if transit is, let's say, 15% of the funding, is it getting it up to 30% of funding? Is it funding all the transit projects? Is it funding it proportionate to its share of the requests that we had through the universe of projects? I think it's we're trying to figure out the detail on that. So this is kind of the one piece that's to be decided. Um, but yes, I think we're absolutely going to look at the performance metrics and see how the different scenarios compare on that front.
Gotcha. Well, then I guess readapting my comment, I would say if looking at the investment side, prioritizing projects or weighting projects that are heavier that boosts typically, what we see more is frequency is more effective at boosting ridership, which feeds into those other metrics. So that could be a factor. So any sort of transit projects that boost amenities and boost frequency, typically drive ridership more than other investments.
Thanks, Mitch. Any other comments on this? Yes, Trip.
So I would think just a percentage of requests would not necessarily maximize the mode shift. That if you're looking at, as you said, you're going to run these performance metrics, it seems it would be a certain, somewhat arbitrary, but you have to pick a number, um, a scenario that boosts those performance metrics by a certain percentage rather than just looking at percentage of requests.
Yeah. I mean, so we do have the defined targets, so I guess we could look and see whether we're hitting those targets. But I think the challenge
So
is,
more than hitting the target. So like if your other scenarios say hit some of these targets or don't fully hit them, what would you need to do to change the project funding, prioritize projects to say exceed if it's a project that other scenarios are falling short on, or to if all the other scenarios meet that, what would it take to say increase it by 50%, or just, some number that would have to be somewhat arbitrary, but would depend on how the other scenarios are panning out. In a way, you almost need to run the other scenarios first and see how things are coming out, to my mind, to then craft the mode shift scenario. Just doing a percent of request, I mean, that's a quick and easy way to do it, but I'm not sure that would maximize, the value, which I see, which I think is a great idea to have these scenarios of showing how both what the different projects would be under different scenarios, but also how much the performance changes.
So I think I understand. Basically, have a baseline, whichever of those scenarios seems to be performing best, and then try and figure out what additional sort of trade-offs of pulling projects out.
Right. What would it take to, say, increase the best of the other three scenarios by, 25%, 50%? Depends on how well the others do.
Okay. I think that's helpful. I think we can see how feasible that idea is. I hadn't thought of that one, so I appreciate it. And JJ, it looked like you would come off mute. Did you have a comment as well?
No, my audio was not working, so I was just getting back into it.
Any other thoughts or comments on this? So our goal, again, with this is basically once we've got the scoring methodology finalized, we're going to score all the projects. We'll develop these scenarios, and then our goal would be to bring this back to you all. I think April is our final adoption of a recommendation for the constrained plan overall. But hopefully we'd be able to bring you something in March to start comparing the scenarios a month in advance. So we can start making some of those trade-off discussions that we were talking about. And sort of on that note, the other part of this is going to help with our public engagement and outreach. So this next phase, this sort of constrained plan development, is our next big push for public engagement. And so we're going to begin outreach and comment in late January into early February on the sort of investment options. Just like we did last time, we're going to be trying to meet with a lot of communities and organizations where they are. But the other part of this is we are looking at options to do whether it's in person or virtual town halls as well. And we are looking for co-hosts to be able to do some of those. So if anyone is interested in helping us co-host an event, whether it's at like county offices or if it's a virtual, please reach out to Dorian or me, and we'll get you in touch with Holly. Or if you have her email, you can email Holly directly. But just reach out to us so we can start coordinating those, because we're looking for any and all opportunities right now to get out into the public early next year. So that's everything I had, if there's no further questions.
So just to piggyback off of the public engagement portion, we do have an ask of you all. We want you to think about what connections to communities that you all have that may need to hear from us. And then, make at least one warm introduction for us by close of business December 15th. I also want to provide you all with a public engagement questionnaire that basically builds off of those communities that need to hear from us, what their affiliation to you all is, and allows us to build a list of stakeholders that we can engage with throughout this public engagement period over the next 3 months. So I've dropped that in the chat here, the engagement link. So again, we just want to hear from you all in terms of any other stakeholders within your communities that you know of that needs to hear from us about not just the LRTP, but other planning endeavors that we have within the agency as well. So if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know, Miles, and then we can pass those off to Holly Gord, our engagement coordinator. But again, we want to make sure that we have an exhaustive list of other stakeholders and public stakeholders that we can reach out to for their input in our projects. So with that, that concludes our presentations. I want to open up the floor for any additional questions or concerns. Seeing none, we thank you all for your time today. Again, please reach out with any other questions or concerns regarding our LRTP process. and we will get back with you soon on a date for our next advisory work group. It should be scheduled for the last Wednesday in the month of January, but we'll confirm that and make sure that we send out the meeting invite in a timely manner. With that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.